I assume we'll know. Oh, there we go.
Oh,
Right? Awesome. Oh, we're live. Yeah.
I think so.
Great. Awesome. Well, welcome everybody. Oh, there we go. Yes. All good. Oh, welcome, Landon. Good. Great. Well, welcome everybody. Welcome. Thank you guys so much for joining us this evening. Uh, This is Sharon Green. I am professor of theater at Davidson College, and I am here tonight with my fabulous research team, Claire Harbin, Katie Stewart, David Lee, and Landon Eldridge, who you can sort of see she will be in visual range shortly. But we are the research team behind the project that appears right before me, which we've titled The Count for liberal arts colleges, who is being produced at Davidson College and its peers, which is based on a research project that we all began this summer, and the results of which were published in HowlRound, an online open sourced publication. So tonight we're here to talk a little bit about our process and our project and provide a little bit of reflection. So what I'm going to do is just, hello, Landon, welcome. What I'm going to do is just provide a small little thumbnail sketch to give you a little bit of background about the project. And then I'm just going to pose a couple of reflective questions to the research team. Then I will just turn it completely over to them to talk a little bit more about their experiences and what it was like. Great. So before we actually start, I wanted to say a couple of thank yous because we were able to conduct this research thanks to support that we got from multiple different areas. So first of all, we received some research grant support from Davidson Arts and Civic Engagement. So a special thank you and shout out to Sherry Nelson, who's director of that program. We also received support from our Justice, Equality, and Community Curriculum Development Grant. So a shout out to Dr. Trish Tilburg and the members of the committee for that grant. And then I also want to shout out to faculty in the math and computer science department, specifically Chase Smith, who was also the director or former director of the DataCat Center, who provided us with really invaluable help at multiple points in our research project. And also Lori Heyer and Tim Chartier, who steered me in the right direction at the very earliest stages of this project.
Excuse me, Sharon, sorry. There's apparently some mumble jumble from the feedback. So if anyone on the Zoom has their YouTube link up, please make sure it's muted because I think we're having issues being heard right now.
Great, thanks, Claire. Okay, I don't have it on my computer, y'all. So is it on my end? Because I don't have that window open. But tell me if it continues. How about if I'll talk and Claire, let me know if you continue to hear it. So just a little bit of background. All of these students were enrolled in a course that I taught in the spring called 21st Century Female Playwrights. And I had embedded an assignment in that class that was a riff on a larger project that was done by an organization called the Lilies and published in the Dramatist Guild, which asked the question, who is being produced in American theater? And the results, which were collected from several hundred theaters across the US, revealed the underrepresentation of women and playwrights of color. So I asked myself the question, well, gee, if this is what's going on in professional theater, I wonder what's happening at Davidson's peer institutions. I wonder what plays and playwrights are being produced at liberal arts colleges. And I thought, why don't I have students work on collecting data as part of the class project? So we did that. We began that process in the class. Of course, spring was interrupted by COVID, and so was our collective data project. So that got put on hold, but then towards the end of the semester, David reached out to me and said, hey, Sharon, by the way, David was a computer science major at Davidson, and said, hey, Sharon, I was thinking maybe I could just keep working on that project as my final project for the course. And I thought, well, that's a cool idea, I'll go for it. So then in May, I'm looking at the results of David's research, and I thought, wow, this is really interesting and illuminating. And he had collected data from 20 schools, I believe, David. And all of a sudden, the light bulb went off, and I thought, you know, a lot of students have had summer experiences canceled because of COVID. What if we all just got on board with collecting more data and seeing what was revealed? So I reached out to the students in the class. I invited everyone to participate, and Claire, Katie, David, and Landon said yes enthusiastically and jumped on board, and thus began our research project. And I'll leave some of the more granular details of the data collection for our conversation. But I just want to say that in addition to collecting data, I think one of the things that we did as part of this research project that was really rich was that we had these wonderful conversations. David had gone home to South Korea, so we were meeting at 8 p.m. on Tuesday evenings, and David was having breakfast, and we were all having late night snacks, and we were both talking about that week's research tasks, but we were also having really rich conversations about the implications of what we were discovering along the way. And so at the end of our collection and reflection process, we considered where we could share our research. And I floated the idea of pitching our story to HowlRound, primarily because it is an open sourced digital platform. And I thought there were some really interesting conversations happening already on HowlRound, and our research could usefully participate in those conversations. So we began the writing and publishing phase of it. And I do wonder what that was like for the students, because the editorial process is one that I'm familiar with as a scholar, but might have been frustrating for the rest of the team. I don't know, because we went back and forth with the editor on multiple revisions. But great. Okay, so for those of you who have not had the opportunity to read the results of our research, I think somewhere, maybe either in the chat or elsewhere during our presentation, we will we'll post a link to that article. Some of you may have already noticed that I am sitting in front of a delightful virtual background, and that actually is the data visualization that resulted from our project, or one of the visualizations that resulted from our project. So let me stop talking and throw out a couple of questions for the four of you guys. I think the first question I'd be interested in is for you guys to talk a little bit about the collaboration and cooperation. All of you have worked on theatrical productions, but I wonder what you thought about the collaborative process on a very different kind of project, on this kind of data collection, visualization, and analysis project. So I wonder if anyone wants to start us off talking a little bit about the experience of collaboration for you.
I'd be glad to start. That it was just a really interesting situation all around. Because it started as a collaborative project when we first started, just because everybody was collecting the data together, and we were going into like this the Data Cats meetings together, like discussing how we want to go about this, what kind of help we need, and then we come back from spring break and we are sent home. And so from that point on, it became my personal project. Which again, I thank Dr. Green for that, because it was just, I was in South Korea, like very far away from America. And it was just like really thoughtful of Sharon to allow me to do that as my final project. Anyway, that became an individual project, and then it became a collaborative project again, at which point we needed to figure out how we wanted to split up the workload. And it just, I think the team was just, like all of us just had different specialties and different talents that we could all kind of pull together to create this project. And, Landon and Katie helped out a lot with the content and the writing part. They're great writers. Claire and I focused mostly on the data visualization part. So I think just the diverse talent that we had on the team helped a lot, and the process kind of came naturally to a lot of us.
That was really cool for me to see, David. I thought, which was like you guys just sort of naturally picked up, tasks and kind of took a leadership role in specific tasks. Each of you did that, and for me, watching kind of from the outside, that was pretty remarkable to watch how you guys did that. What about the rest of you? Any additional thoughts about what you learned or the experience of collaborating on this kind of project?
I thought it was really cool to collaborate on a project about theater that wasn't necessarily doing a show. And I think that the skills that we came into Davidson and then grew at Davidson in terms of data analysis and data collection and being able to write and explore and kind of desire to learn more about something really helped us a lot in this project. But it was really cool to just come together with theater friends and think about something that is bigger than just a show, and it will last longer than a weekend. And I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Claire. So I wonder, you guys, what did you think? So you each did take kind of responsibility or ownership over some specific tasks in the process, but I wonder if you could talk about what was challenging for you about the project and the process, and what you learned along the way, either by participating in the research or through the results of the research, right? Through what we discovered from doing the research.
I can talk a little bit about the data collection. It kind of made me realize the importance of having a clear and like non-confusing website, because a lot of the time it was really difficult to find like archival information about the shows that had been produced even this like past semester. It was a little bit confusing. So it kind of, made me like think about the way that Davidson's website is set up, which I feel is very intuitive. But just some schools, it was kind of hard to find that information, and then it wasn't clear like who was on faculty. So I think that was maybe a particular challenge that was with some schools and not with others. Yeah.
I feel like for me, because I had never really been involved in a research project before, I kind of always had to ask myself, like when do we think this is ready to be published? And like, because I always feel like there's, more data that can be collected or more things that we can write. But at the same time, I do think it was really important that we got it out. And Claire one week was like, I feel like this is an important moment to get this research out. And like, I think we should fast track this. And, I definitely agree. And I'm glad we did. I just think it was a little different because like in a show, you have like the show date and you're like, this is, when we're ready. But, we kind of had to make a call here, and that was definitely new for me.
I think it was also, oh, sorry, David.
Go ahead, Claire, go ahead.
I think it was also really challenging doing a collaborative project really far apart from each other. So even when David and I were doing the data visualization, it was working with the huge time difference and screen sharing to figure out how to do the software because we couldn't sit down in a room together and just plunk it out on the computer. So I think it was definitely a challenge, but really fulfilling that we were able to do it anyway.
Kind of combining Landon and Claire's point, I now work in the data field, like data profession. So, and like I've always been interested in like data analytics and data engineering. So I think the most important part about this project for me, like process-wise, was having clean data that everybody collected with a shared understanding and standard. Because if the data is not clean, if the data has fault in it, then the resulting visualizations or the analysis you draw from it just cannot be correct. So, and being far apart and having to communicate with a time difference and over thousands of miles from each other, and just like having the shared understanding of okay, so this is the type of data we're going to collect. Here are the options for that specific data field. And this is what we're going to do if that data is not available. Like all that scenario in all of our first like real published research project, I think was very challenging. But in the end, I think we were able to collect some really quality data and produce meaningful results out of it.
Yeah, David, you raise really interesting and important points. And just so that folks understand, part of what we were collecting data about the particular plays that were produced at liberal arts colleges and their authorship. So specifically, what was the gender of the playwright and what was the racial identity of the playwright? Well, that is not information it's not as if you click on a little box and that information like magically just shows up, right? So we might have, just for folks to understand, we would look up the season at a particular school and we would see the title of a play and a playwright, and we might not have ever heard of either one. And so then we had to determine, well, how does this playwright identify? So we had to have some big conversations about certain kinds of issues. Like, okay, if we couldn't, how are we going to determine what the racial identity of a playwright was? Right? We wanted to be sure that what we did was choose the identity that they figure out how they self-identified, right? So there were times where that information wasn't on a website, right? The playwright didn't have a website. It wasn't on the school's website. So we had to do a little bit of digging, like look up maybe a New York Times review of that playwright and how did that playwright then talk about him or herself. And if we couldn't find that out, we weren't going to guess. So there were a couple of playwrights that I felt like, I am 99% sure that I know what their identity is, but I don't see there's no evidence that I have located that supports that conclusion. So we're putting them in the other category. So I think that's an important thing to know about the data that we were looking to collect. It's not like obvious and it's not in a single space or location. And just before anybody else talks, I just wanted to say to those folks who are watching, we welcome you to pose some questions in the chat on YouTube, and I am going to kind of keep my eye on that chat. And as I see questions pop up, I will pose them to the research team. Okay, so feel free to go ahead in there if there's anything that you'd like to know, either about our process, about how we work together, or about the results and the findings and our thoughts about the results and the findings. That might actually be a great thing for me to pose to you guys, right? Which was, as the results were kind of coming in and you guys began to see these visualizations behind me, what were some of the thoughts that you were having? What were you thinking about?
I was definitely shocked. I spoke a little bit about this in the article, but I kind of walked my life thinking that the theater world was really progressive and dedicated to racial justice and equity and gender justice and equity. And after reading The Count, which was the national data set that we based our research off of, it was shocking to see that it was not at all what it should be and what I thought it was. And seeing that reflected in a liberal arts school, where then I thought, okay, well, these people are younger and they're catering to a younger audience and we are more aware of what's happening in the world. Like, we have to be better. And we were slightly better, but it is still tremendously low and shocking and saddening almost that we're not where we need to be in 2020. So I think it was a little disheartening and it definitely popped my bubble of naivete, but.
Claire and I are currently in the same directing class, and we've been having a lot of conversations about who's in the room when you're producing certain plays and how that affects the decision to select plays, and how we like the value of producing something that's historical versus something that's contemporary, because a lot of, as you can see in our research, a lot of historical plays are written by white men, And so like this, I don't have an answer to this, but it's really caused a reevaluation of like what should be considered an essential play to learn in an academic setting, and how, yes, we should still do Shakespeare and Chekhov and et cetera, et cetera. But we should also just consider like, why are we only producing those, and what other historically significant plays can we choose that are not just by those men?
I think for me, the most interesting findings for me, thank you, Sharon, for pulling those graphs. I was actually about to ask you to, because these bar graphs were the most interesting to me, and especially the top one. So for those people in the audience that have not had the opportunity to read the research, this visualization basically represents the published date of the plays that we researched, and those plays authorship and their gender and racial identity. So the top one represents the gender distribution, with the females being represented with purple and males being represented with orange. And if you look closely, for the decade of 2010 and after, there were actually more plays produced that were written by female playwrights than male playwrights. But one disheartening thing was like, what happened in the 2000s? Why are 75% of the plays that were produced from that time period written by men? And like, actually, like from 1950s to 1999, you know, the gender distribution was more equal. So like, when you're certain that you have the right data for the visualizations, and you know, like the data visualization part is actually the simple part, when you plug in the numbers and you just do boop, 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 because you know, that's how data visualization softwares work these days. They're so easy and interactive. But when you plug those numbers in and they just like show you like what you have in your hand, you're almost like in a disbelief sometimes. I'm like, that doesn't look right, but that's what we have. And it is like, I was like, what happened to the 2000? But then again, it is actually really optimistic. It's an optimistic thing to see that very contemporary plays, a lot of them being produced right now in liberal arts college theaters, are actually written by women. And I hope that we can learn from this and keep producing these contemporary plays by female playwrights and also playwrights of color, and we can start making some changes in the liberal arts college theater scenes.
And going off of both Landon and David's point quickly, I think talking specifically about who's in the room in terms of what shows you can produce, this is also really important to look at the demographics of who is on the faculty and staff of the theater department, because in order for a play by a playwright of color to be adequately and equitably produced, it has to be by a director of color with people of color who have power in the room. So it's also it's looking at who is in the room and making sure you are not just a faculty of white theater artists as well, because that's a huge part of it and what shows can be produced.
Yeah, to add a little bit to that, when we were initially collecting data from all these productions and schools, we were actually looking at that data as well, the director's gender identity and also racial identity. But as we mentioned briefly in the research article, we believe that that could be a longer term discussion. It wouldn't be as like a college's like faculty composition is not as malleable, I guess, and is not as easy to transform. But like, if we're doing this research further in the future, I think that would be like one interesting thing to include, saying, hey, like, here is, you know, when female playwrights plays were produced, this was like the racial and gender distribution of the directors who were in charge of directing the shows, and like building correlations and relationships between the playwrights and the directors and how much that is impacted, I think would be an interesting thing to have in the future.
Katie, Landon, did either one of you want to add anything to that? Any sort of more kind of reflective thoughts about things that you learned along the way in the process, or perhaps even, and this is actually for all of you, things that maybe you've thought of since we completed the research project. For folks out there, I think it came out in HowlRound just a couple of weeks before the semester started. So we didn't have a lot of time, the group of us, to reconnect, right? It came out in HowlRound. David started a full-time job in Charlotte. The rest of us got swept away with the beginning of a fall semester. And so we haven't really had a little bit of time ourselves to have had some distance from it, and then kind of shared any additional reflections. Just for you guys, one of the things that really struck me was we began this data collection project really in January, and some significant things happened since we began the data collection. Not only did COVID hit and we went remote, but George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis, and things really erupted in this country, and also, frankly, on HowlRound. All of a sudden, while we're continuing to collect our data and write our article, we are seeing multiple articles start appearing in HowlRound that dealt with issues around race and representation in American theater, right? And this summer, if folks are interested, go and look at, there's been a plethora of really interesting, exciting, and groundbreaking ideas that have been published in HowlRound around this issue. And so it was, for me, it was interesting that all of a sudden we were collecting data and analyzing data and engaged in this project, and then it emerged in a context we could never have imagined. So I just wonder if you guys have had any additional reflective thoughts about that whole, process.
I think the biggest reflection and takeaway that I had from this project in terms of the context that the article was published in was the sense of calm in a very turbulent time. And it was very grounding to know that there was at least some small thing that I could contribute to the larger conversation when there are larger systemic issues that are being highlighted once again. This is not the first time these issues have been highlighted, but the Black Lives Matter movement started up again, and this was something that combined theater arts and activism in a really enlightening way to kind of combine the two of them to show that there are still inequities in the arts and what we can do to fix them. So I think that was really grounding for me, particularly.
This time, like over the summer and the end of the spring semester, as I'm sure everybody did, I did a lot of reflecting on what I was going to be learning the next semester, and what I could do in my senior year at Davidson in terms of considering issues of what's being produced. And I think that it really made me think about ways to incorporate a diverse set of plays into the curriculum, and not just in what's being actually performed, because we have very limited slots for actual department productions. And so I've been thrilled that both of the theater classes that I'm taking this semester have really chosen a lot of plays by female and BIPOC playwrights. And so that's kind of just been there's more than one way to have a more inclusive curriculum. So that's been a good thing, and something that's been nice to see in my last year here.
Yeah, I think this is just it's like a unique time for reflection, and I think both the murder of George Floyd and kind of the coronavirus, they kind of combine for this, just because so many theaters right now are like still closed, and college productions, you know, they can't really be inside. So it just provides, I think, a lot of time to kind of reflect on what seasons you're going to produce when we are able to open theaters, or what seasons we're going to produce in whatever way we can do theater now. So I think I hope our data is helpful with that, just in laying out kind of the facts of where we are now, to hopefully, you know, shape where we can eventually be, hopefully soon.
Yeah, I agree that I think if theaters attempted after this is all kind of, it's more safe to go and watch theater. If theaters attempted to go back and like produce the same kinds of things that they had been before, I think that there will be major pushback to that. And that's really exciting. So fingers crossed.
All right. For me, kind of on a different note, I think during those months while we were conducting this research, I noticed this trend of using, I mean, I think the use of art as a means of social commentary and kind of social resistance almost was more prevalent, and at least it was more visible to me, especially on different social media platforms, whether that be through murals, paintings on the streets, poetry, or music, or paint, or drawing, and art, other forms of art. I think I just noticed it a lot more. And in noticing that, I was really glad to be doing this research and to be contributing to the conversation in an educational space, where I commented on this a little bit in the article as well. If we are trying to make changes in the society in every aspect and at every facet of the society, and Davidson College and its peer institutions are training their students to prepare them for to go out and make changes in that society, then we need to be doing that in every way possible. And for theater students and for artists like us, when we are going through this education in college, like, this is what we need. We need to be producing and like working on these projects that tell the stories of minorities, of the Black population, of the Hispanic people, of women, of the LGBTQ community. Like, that's what we need to be doing. And for us to be able to contribute to that conversation, saying, hey, look, we're not doing as well as we need to be doing, or as well as we think we are doing. I think that was a really special moment, kind of tying that use of art as a force to make change in the society, and pushing that same concept to educational institutions.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, David. I think sometimes we think, oh, we're just doing college theater, but we're not just doing college theater, right? It's not a just at all. You guys are preparing yourselves to, not just necessarily for careers in theater, but for careers broadly broad. And it's critical that you have the opportunity to engage with the diversity of storytelling that there is in the world, right? We do have one question, and it's about that the section of the bar graph, David, that you pointed people's attention to earlier on. The question is about how in the bar that looks at the time period from 2010 to the present, you had mentioned that there are more female playwrights that were produced from that decade. And the question is asking whether or not we had any thoughts about why that might be the case. Why in the last 10 years have there been more plays produced by female playwrights? So we did talk a bit about this, but I wonder if anyone wants to take this up or remind folks out there what the conversation was that we had about that.
Well, I think in the last 10 years, the count has showed, because they did like a first round and then a few years later they did the same research. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there was a slight improvement. And so, I mean, in some respects, you know, more women are being produced professionally. It's still not enough, but more.
Right.
I also think our data showed like a lot of the same play was being produced, not exclusively, but we had like a number of The Book of Will by Lauren Gunderson. So I think it shows that, you know, hopefully liberal arts schools, you know, are, you know, willing and trying to produce female playwrights, and, you know, there's a slight uptick in those being produced nationally.
And kind of put simply, I think we could correlate this uptick to kind of like the success of social activist movements that have been very vocal about the lack of representation by especially female playwrights, and more recently works by playwrights of color as well. The different organizations like the Lilies, who did the initial research of The Count and The Count 2.0, which we based our research off of, and the Kilroys with the Kilroys list, and many different ways popping up in the professional theater scene to acknowledge and credit the works by female playwrights. I think they are seeing some real success here, and also I think more contemporary plays. There's a lot more plays being produced by female playwrights in the 2010s than ever before, and now that people are actually paying attention and being intentional about producing works by female playwrights, there's a huge sea of works to choose from, and huge sea of female playwrights to acknowledge and to discover. So I think that excitement is also carrying over to the liberal arts theater scene.
Yeah, David, I think that's a good point. We started, for folks out there, we started the class. The first week was really looking at what I'm going to reference as the gender equity movement in American theater, which really kind of gets kickstarted in about 2009. I don't need to provide the background for everybody. You can come take the class and talk about that kind of micro history of that 10 years. But indeed, as David said, there are a couple of key organizations, the Lilies and the Kilroys. And I think one of the interesting things that we noted in the article was that that movement seems to have been successful. There's been a significant uptick in the production of plays by women. And one of the questions that we pose in the article is whether or not this moment we're living through right now will catalyze something parallel for playwrights of color. Will we see 2020 as the beginning of a movement of racial equity in representation in American theater? And will we look back, you know, maybe if we did the same research in 4 years, 5 years, or 10 years, will we look back and see 2020 as this, right, as this moment where everything changed, right? Because yeah, so it'll be interesting. I encourage other folks who have the capacity to do this kind of data collection to do this study again. Do it in a couple of years. Do it or do it on a larger scale. Right? We collected as much data as the group, the 5 of us, could manage in the short period that we had to conduct this research. But our data is not comprehensive. We did not collect data from every single liberal arts college in America. That would have required a research team, you know, of maybe 25, right? So there was no way that we could have accomplished that, but that would be a research project I would love to see somebody take up. and then to revisit it, maybe 3 years, 6 years, just like the count did, and see if the needle moves. I think that would be really interesting. Yeah. So I think I heard, though you guys correct me if I'm wrong, that some of you, I don't know if Claire or Katie or Landon or David, someone's parents are watching us. Is you guys say that's correct?
I
I
think
sent the
my
link to my parents.
Sorry?
I sent the link to my parents. They might be
Well,
watching.
I would
I think my
love
parents
to.
might be watching.
Yes, I would love to very specifically invite parents of our student research team to pose a question if they have one in the chat. But I would also like to express my gratitude to the parents of my entire student research team. Gratitude, immense gratitude for the opportunity to get to work with your daughter or your son on this research project. It's been, I have to, I'm going to be honest, I'm going to take a moment here, okay? I'm going to say some things here. First of all, I love all of you. And I want to say something very personal, which was that working on this research project with all of you in the middle of a pandemic felt like a lifeline for me too. It truly did. It helped to keep me connected. Someone else said this, but it felt like we were doing something important. And I really felt the energy of that. I felt the urgency of that. And even if we're not causing a revolution, what we were doing was we were using the skills that we had, right? We were using the interests that we had to conduct research that I think matters. And the fact that we would come together every Tuesday and share what we had done and share our reflections was so intellectually, psychologically, and emotionally nourishing for me. And I am grateful to all of you for participating in that. And I also want to acknowledge publicly that we were all equal contributors. I know that sometimes people see a faculty member and they assume that the students were just assistants, and that's not how this played out. I felt like we came together as a team and we all played to our strengths, sure, but we came together as a team. And I thought one of the most interesting parts for me that was collaborative was after we had collected all of our data, we created this Google Doc, and I asked everybody, just look at the data and write in kind of bullet point form what your reflections are. Like, what are some things that you notice or you think about as you look at the data? And then we went over that Google Doc together. And it's really from that collaborative piece of work that we ended up pulling out the kind of the conclusions that were the substance of our article. And so I just want to acknowledge that we were equal partners, we were equal collaborators. I adored working with each of you. I was really, frankly, moved to see the way that you cooperated and collaborated with each other, and that you allowed different members of the team to take a lead on the thing that was their strength. And I saw a level of respect and cooperation between and amongst you guys that really just floored me. So I am grateful. Hold on, I see a question. A question. Whoa, a couple questions. Okay. Oh, Claire, your parents. Hello, Claire's parents. Blah, 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 blah. My question is, how much overlap of productions was there between liberal arts colleges? Bear in mind that we've not read the final product. I think the question meaning, in other words, was there a particular play that we saw multiple productions of right across the liberal arts colleges? I think that's the question. Mr. Harbin, if I've gotten your question wrong, please correct me. But if you're asking, for example, did we see 10 productions of Hamlet, right? Claire says she's going to take this one.
So the one that sticks in my memory the most was The Wolves by Sarah Jack, which was first performed in 2016. I think out of all of the schools who had one show by a female playwright, that was consistently the show that they did, which was super interesting.
Huh. You know why that's also interesting is because I actually proposed that for Davidson for this past year, and we could not get the rights to it. I think it might be because Wake was doing it, or Elon, or some other local area school had already requested the rights. For those of you who don't know, it's about a group of high school students who are on a soccer team. So it is a full female cast. So really terrific and tremendously rich roles for young women. Yeah, but thank you for asking that question. It's interesting too. Somebody asked, HowlRounds had posted a link to the article on their Facebook page, and I responded to a query by someone on that page when it first came out. They asked if there was a lot of Shakespeare, and I think that they were asking that because they thought the overrepresentation of male playwrights was somehow acceptable if the male playwright in question was Shakespeare, right? I think that was the subtext of the question. And I think I looked when we got that question, and I looked to see what was going on. And there wasn't a significant overrepresentation of specific plays by male playwrights or by Shakespeare, frankly. I mean, by one specific male playwright.
Right.
Like it wasn't like everyone was doing Tennessee Williams or Shakespeare, or what have you.
Right.
Anyway, go ahead, David. Yes.
Yeah, I just have I have the data pulled up right now, and there were 10 productions written by William Shakespeare, and actually,
right.
Yeah, they were almost all, different plays as well. I think there was one. I see one production written by Tennessee Williams. So there's not too much overlap.
It's interesting, yeah. I don't know if there's a way for us to share a link with folks who are watching, share a link to the HowlRound essay. I'm not quite sure how to do that. Does anybody else know technically?
I can do that.
Cool, thank you. Yes, as a matter of fact, I will ask folks in the audience a favor, which is if you haven't read the essay yet, first of all, I encourage you to do so, because you can have the opportunity to delve even more deeply into the brilliance of the research team. But I also ask you, if you are willing to do so, to write a comment on the bottom. Just so that it's clear that we've got folks reading. Oh, there we go. Reading our essays. Okay, wait, we have another question. Why was there a backslide in the first decade of the 2000s versus before or after? That's on the one above me, the orange. Does anyone want to take that question? I'm not sure if anyone knows the answer, right? I love David's explanation of data. It's like it tells you the stuff, but it doesn't necessarily tell you the why, right? Yeah.
Right, and for this specific project, one reason that I could think of is that well, here's the thing, like just because not as many plays written by female playwrights were produced from that time period doesn't mean that there was like any less active there was any less activity by female playwrights during the period, like in professional theater. It just means that they were not produced as much. So one reason that I could think of is that the plays written by female playwrights from that period were maybe not well recognized by the critics, because maybe they were just not like the system to recognize plays by female playwrights were not the same in the 2000 to 2009 era as they are in the 2010s. Like as we said before, like right around 2009 was when there was this spark of the social activist movement to produce more plays by female playwrights. And that's when the organizations like the Lilies and the Kilroys started putting out lists of plays written by female playwrights that should be recognized and that are really just phenomenal pieces of work. But the plays from the 2000 to 2009 era just may not have that same level of recognition or that system to support them, which could contribute to, you know, like not as many directors or faculty members remembering plays by female playwrights from that era. It's just one possible explanation that I could think off the top of my head, but I don't have anything to back that up.
I see one additional question that asked a little bit about our data set and what productions and programming from theater departments we chose to include in our data collection. So this is also described in the article, but we decided that we would move forward collecting data about whatever a particular department presented as its official season. And for different schools, that was conceptualized differently. But if they put it forward as this is our department's official season, we included it. And you know, as a few of the other panelists have mentioned, with some schools it was not easy to find information. There were a couple of schools that we actually had to delete from our data set because it was too difficult to find out any information about what was done and what was part of their official season, what were class projects. We did not include anything that was a course project. So there were some schools we had to delete because it was too difficult to reconcile them with equivalency with the other schools. I see we're at about 8:25 and we were going to try to keep this to an hour. So I wanted to ask each of you to just maybe take a moment and have just a last thought. It can be whatever you want it to be. It can be about this experience. It could be about something you learned. It could be about your future hopes for the impact of this research, but whatever you like, just take maybe a minute to share a closing thought.
Sorry, it's me again. But I think I speak for the rest of the research group when I say we were all very grateful for this opportunity. So Sharon, thank you so much. This was, I think, for all of us, this was our first paid research opportunity, and we were just very lucky to have that opportunity. During the pandemic, when a lot of us had our summer plans kind of scratched and thrown out the window, just for, and not just limited to this project, but I know that the theater department put in a lot of work in other ways to make sure that, theater students at Davidson had ways to still improve themselves academically over the summer break. A very abnormal summer break. So I just want to thank the whole theater department, Sharon in particular, and the people who are in charge of getting the scholarship to us, because that was very big. Thank you.
I mean, I'd just like to second David in thanking you, Sharon, for the opportunity, and also for in your class introducing us to so many contemporary plays by women. I think that was one of the biggest takeaways for me with this research, is kind of the importance of maybe focusing more on contemporary works, because as the data shows, we're starting to see more works produced by women and BIPOC playwrights. And so I think that means it's important to start sharing those more contemporary stories instead of maybe, I mean, not that we shouldn't, still try and keep historical works in our curriculum, but also just kind of moving the focus forward, because there are more voices that are being included.
Yeah, I mean, I'd third David and Landon and say thank you, Sharon, and also thank you to everyone else. It was a really fun and interesting experience. And I feel like I definitely learned a lot. We were kind of talking about this the other day, but all research just starts with a question. So I think this is just, taught me a lot about kind of if you have a question, go follow it, and you can definitely, find the answers and help, broaden research already out there. So I think that's just been a really cool experience, and I am happy to have worked with all of you.
Ditto to all of that. Thank you for the opportunity to work together, to all of you. And Sharon, thank you for opening my eyes to a world that I did not know. I was very new to reading plays. Really, most of the plays I read in high school in class were by white men. So you opened my eyes to a world that I was not aware of, but also given me an avenue to, and this research has given me an avenue to kind of continue the passion to look for how art can serve as activism and how we can make theaters more equitable and more accessible to everyone. And I think that's really important and really cool to find and to have an avenue to look at, especially in the time that we're living in. So thank you all for the work that we've done together. And I hope that the work that we all continue to do can make those desires for theater a reality.
Awesome, you guys. Yes. A good good research starts with a good question, right? That's a good reminder, Katie. A good question. Who is being produced at liberal arts colleges around the country? And my just sort of last acknowledgement is again to all of you. And as a reminder, I think I said this in the article that one of the things that I learned in this process of working with all of you is how vital it is to have students as an integral, as partners and an integral part of creating new knowledges in our field. This field is you guys. You guys are the future. People tell you you're the future of the country, but you're the future of American theater. You guys are. As artists and as audiences, you guys are the future. And I adore all of you. I'm grateful for the opportunity to work with you. I'm also, as you guys are, I'm incredibly grateful to Davidson College and to the infrastructure. The opportunities that Davidson offers for student research are pretty incredible. And the support that Davidson offers for faculty members to include students as partners in research is pretty phenomenal and really facilitates the kind of innovation that we all were able to produce. So thanks to all of you, and thanks to everybody who tuned in to watch tonight. We're really grateful for your interest in our research, and I hope you all do go ahead and check out the article and spend a little more time looking at the beautiful data visualizations that appear as part of that article. And if you have any questions, you can find me at shgreen@davidson.edu, and I welcome your questions from now and in perpetuity. So feel free to be in touch as you'd like. And everyone have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much.